That's the sound we are recreating in Serum today. If you like it, make sure to subscribe, press the notification bell so you see all of our videos, and hit like on the video. What's up guys, this is Tassian with Cymatics, and today I'm going to be showing you how to remake the bass and the lead from the Zomboy song Outbreak. So first let me play the original and then I will show you our patches. Alright, so that's the original and this is what we have. So this is going to be a two-part video where we first break down the bass, then we're going to break down the lead. So as always, the download to the presets and the MIDI will be in the description below, and I definitely recommend you guys downloading that and following along, just because you're going to learn the most if you're doing it step by step the way I'm doing it. First, let's get into the bass. Alright, so we're going to open up Serum, and for this patch we're going to be using the sub-oscillator, oscillator A, and oscillator B. We're going to use the Outbreak bass 1 for oscillator A, and then for oscillator B, we are going to use the Outbreak bass 2. So I'm also going to switch these to 3D mode just because that's how I like to look at the wavetables before I'm doing any crazy modulation. And then let's also turn on the sub, and we're going to leave this on the sine wave and drop it down an octave. We're also going to select direct out, so the sub bypasses all the filters and effects. So now let's listen to what we have. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to set up both of our oscillators before we get into doing any of the modulations. So let's take oscillator A and drop it down an octave. And then we're going to drag the unison up to 5. So now basically we are, instead of playing one voice of oscillator A, we're now playing 5 voices. And the reason why all these bars are spaced out a little bit is because they're detuned. So we're actually going to take this detune knob and drag it down to around here. So now we should be hearing. And now let's also take the blend knob and turn it down to around 7. Just so the detuned voices are way quieter than the in-tune voice. So now we should be hearing. We're also going to take the wavetable position and turn it all the way up. So now we should be hearing. Alright. And for this warp mode, we are going to use bend minus, and we're also going to take this knob all the way up. So for using the warp mode, this is when I would click on the oscillator window and change this to the 2D view, because you can actually see what the warp mode is doing in the 2D view. You cannot in the 3D view. So what this is doing is it's taking the middle point and it's basically pushing everything to the sides and warping the middle. So now we should be hearing, ready, we'll listen to it without it. So then we are good right there. And let's move to oscillator B. We're going to leave the octave where it is. And we are going to take the unison up to 7. So we're going to drag this detune down to around 10 o'clock. So it's a little less phasey. And we're going to leave the blend where it is. And we're going to take this wavetable position and turn it all the way up. So now we have like a lot sharper, more like high-end sound. And we're also going to switch this to FM from A and turn this to about 9 o'clock. So basically what this is doing is this is feeding oscillator A through oscillator B. And this is basically just the amount. So at nothing and then like pretty high. So you can get really cool effects with that. So we're going to leave this at 15. So that is pretty much it for the oscillators, just setting the knobs up. I think this would be a good time to start setting up our main LFO. So this LFO is going to be modulating 9 different things, and it's going to be kind of the driving force of the sound. So we're going to leave this at quarter note, and we're going to turn this to envelope because we don't want it to repeat. And then let's start making this shape. So we're going to drag this like this, and then we will take this curve, drag it down a little bit, and then let's make a point right here. We're going to double click. And you see how if we drag this is like moving freely, we're going to hold option so it snaps to the grid. And we're going to snap it right in the middle. And so it's just around, 2 little bars down. We're going to make another point and drag it to around right here. And we're going to curve this. And then we're also going to make another point, drag it right there, curve that. And then we're going to take this curve point right here. So we should have something that looks like this. And before we map that, let's go ahead and make our other LFO, because this is going to be modulating one thing, and that is oscillator A's level. So we are going to also leave this on a quarter note and also select envelope mode. And this is going to be a little bit easier shape to draw. We are going to drag this corner all the way to the top, snap this point to the middle all the way at the top, and we are also going to make a point down here and snap it to this bar and drag it all the way down. And then we are just going to drag this curve to around right there. So let's go ahead and we are going to start setting up our modulations. So first things, let's just get this LFO2 out of the way because it's going to be modulating one thing. We are going to drag it to oscillator A's volume, and we are going to drag the volume knob down to 0 and drag this range up to around 85. So now we should be hearing very similar. And now, so that's out of the way, let's start doing LFO1. So we're going to take LFO1 and we are going to drag it onto wavetable position of oscillator A. And we're going to drag the range down to -21. So now we should be hearing. And we're also going to drag this to the warp mode of oscillator A and drag this range down to -60. Then we are going to take LFO1 and put it on the wavetable position of oscillator B and drag this range down to -27. And then we are going to drag this to the level of oscillator B. Also, we're going to drag the level down to 0, and we are going to drag this range up to 26. So now you're starting to hear that, like, you know, that dubstep-y growl, and we're really going to like take it home with the filter and the effects. But this is all we need to do for the oscillators and the modulations for the oscillators. So the next thing I'm going to move to is the filter. So this filter is going to be a high peak 12. So basically what this is under the multi tab, and this first filter mode is a high pass. So this is high passing, and then this second filter mode is used by modulating the frequency knob, and you can see the little bump right there. If we turn the resonance up, you'll start to see that more. So we basically have like a two-part filter. We are going to enable oscillator A and oscillator B because we want A and B to be running through the filter. And let's start by taking this cutoff to 133. So I'm double clicking and typing in my value. You can get to that by going to the global tab and selecting double click for typable values on controls, and then you'll hit this little save button if you want to save that. So I'm taking that to 133 hertz, and then I'm going to take LFO1 and drag this on to the cutoff and drag this range to where it says 25. So now we should be hearing. Next, I'm going to take this resonance and put it at 47%. So it's just a little bit more like valley. And I'm going to take this pan and type in 40. And this is just going to give it a little bit of stereo effect. Next thing we're going to do is take this drive and put it at 11%. And then we're going to take the frequency knob and turn it all the way up. And then drag LFO1 onto that and drag the range down to -13. So now we should be hearing. So you can see how we're modulating the cutoff and the frequency knob towards each other. This is really just going to give it some cool valley sounds. All right, so last thing we're going to do before we move on is turn on mono and legato and turn the portamento up. And this isn't really going to affect anything for this sound because it's just one MIDI note and then there's a pause and then there's another MIDI note. But for future, you don't want two basses to be playing at the same time in case there's overlapping notes. So that is it for the oscillator tab. Now it is time to move on to the effects tab. So the first effect we're going to put on is the distortion effect. And we are going to drag the distortion mode down to diode 2. So now we should be hearing. And this is really just like kind of compressing everything, adding some high end and grit. And we are going to select this filter mode as post, and we are going to take this to 95 hertz and drag the Q down to 0.1. And then we are going to take this filter mode and drag it to high pass. So now we should be hearing. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the drive and put it to 25, 26, which is where it already is. And we're going to take the mix down to 85. The next thing we're going to add is a filter, and we're going to drag this filter all the way up because these effects go in order, so the distortion runs into the filter. And we are going to select this mode as band reject, which is all the way down in the miscellaneous tab and all the way to the bottom. So we're going to take this cutoff and double click and type in 993. And we are going to drag LFO1 onto the cutoff and drag the range down to -21. So now we should be hearing. Next thing we're going to do is take the resonance to 40%. The next thing we're going to do is take the width and double click and type in 77 and drag LFO1 onto that and drag the range down to -67. And this is definitely going to give another valley sound. So basically what this is doing is this is creating like band reject is basically like it's creating like a notch out. And this width knob is basically automating how wide the notch is. And last thing we're going to do is take the mix down to 60. So it's just not affecting it too much. Next thing we're going to add is a flanger, and we're going to take the rate down all the way to 0 so this LFO isn't even active, and we're going to do it ourselves. So we're going to take the depth to 20%, drag LFO1 on, and drag the range to 16%. And there you go. Like I said, LFO1 will be modulating 9 things, and that was our 9th modulation. So we are done with modulations. So the rest will just be kind of like tightening up this sound. So then we're going to take the mix down to 59 because we don't want this too prominent. So still, it doesn't sound very different. All of these effects are just adding like little final touches to the sound. Next thing we're going to add is a hyper and dimension. And this is basically going to sculpt the stereo space. And you can pretty much play with these settings to get it to where you like. But I'm going to drag the hyper rate down to around 8. The detune up to around 39. And the mix down to 30. So now we should be hearing. And this is just making the sound a little bit wider. And then what I'm going to do next is take the size down to 17 and the mix up to 17. So now we should be hearing. So the next effect we're going to add is the compressor. So we'll select compressor and drag it up under hyper and dimension. And then we're going to select multiband. So now we should be hearing. And this is really going to make the sound like a lot more dubsteppy because this is a very popular effect, is the Ott compression. So we're going to take this threshold and drag it to -22. We're going to leave the ratio at 4/1. We're going to leave the attack at 90. And then we're going to take the release to 545. And we're going to take the gain up to 12.8. So now we should be hearing. So let's listen to that with and without the OTT. This is really just flattening out the transients and making everything sound a lot more smooth and bringing out those highs. So what we're actually going to do next is, it looks like there's no more settings to be touched besides the mix, but we are actually going to move this band, this high band, up to 125, or around 120, 124 is good. And this is basically going to boost those highs. So let's listen. Let's turn it down. So we're basically just boosting those highs, and it's really cool. This is almost acting as an EQ, but with compression. So we're really just boosting those highs, and it sounds a lot better right now. And the last effect we're going to add is a reverb, and we are going to select plate, and you'll see that changes a few settings right here. So if you look at decay and spin depth and spin, it now is pre-delay, damp, and width. So we're going to take the size of this plate verb and take it down to 5%. So now we should be hearing. And that's just adding like a little bit of depth, but we're going to definitely tone this effect down. We're going to take the pre-delay down to 4 milliseconds, and that is basically the amount of time when the signal hits the reverb to when the reverb actually starts working. So we want that to happen pretty quick. And we're going to bring the low cut up to 34%, so we're cutting out some of those muddy lows in the reverb. So we're going to take the high cut up to 89 because we want to cut out a lot of those highs. So now we're really taming. If we turn it down all the way, we're allowing those highs in, but we're going to take it up to 89 because we really don't want a lot of those highs because it'll really make the sound harsh. Then we are going to take the damp up to 91, and we're going to take the width up to 33. Again, very subtle change just because this high cut is really taming a lot of the reverb, but making it wider is definitely just going to sound better because it will make the sound a little bit wider. And then the last thing we're going to do is take this mix up to 33%. So now you can definitely hear that reverb a little bit more. So yeah, it sounds really, really good. So there is the bass. Now let's move on to the lead. So that was part 1. Now we're going to go on to part 2. We're going to, under this group, hit Command-Shift-T to create a new MIDI track. Go into our plugins and select Serum. And then we are going to drag this lead MIDI down to this new track that we made. So let's rename this lead, and let's listen to what we have so far. Let's start making our sound. So for this sound, we are going to be using the sub oscillator, oscillator A, oscillator B, and the noise oscillator. So all 4 oscillators. So let's set those up real quick. Sub oscillator, we are going to make a saw wave, and we are going to drag the octave up to 2. And we're also going to take the level down to around 45%, 44%. And also we are going to open up oscillator A and select the wavetable basic CJW. And we are going to bump this up to 2 octaves. And we're also going to bump the fine up to 25. Then we are going to listen to that real quick, hear what we have. So then let's bump the unison up to 8. All right, we're going to take the detune up to 0.46. Now look, when I click this detune knob and I kind of move it around, all of these voices are spaced evenly. But if you actually look in the original patch, these voices are not spaced evenly. And then let's go to the oscillator B, but these voices are. So the reason why these voices look like that is because if you go to the global tab, usually it says linear right here, and that is for the detune mode if you hover over it, unison detune mode. So we're actually going to select inverted. So now we're looking at it and it looks like that. So then we're going to take the blend and just drop it down 1 value. So we're going to take this to 74, and we are going to take this wavetable position and drag it all the way up to the top. And we are not going to have a warp mode on. And then we're going to take this pan and type in -20. So it goes -20 to the left. And we're just going to turn this volume down a tad. So now we should be hearing. So that really just had a lot to do with the detune and the detune mode. So now let's work on oscillator B. So let's turn on oscillator B, and we are going to select basic mini, and we're going to bump this up 2 octaves. So now we should be hearing. And let's also take this down -25 cents. And we are going to take the unison up to 4. And we are going to leave the detune mode as linear. So it looks like that rather than that. We are going to take the detune up to 0.47, and we'll leave the blend right there. We're going to leave the wavetable position all the way down at 1, and we're going to take this pan and type in 20, so it's 20 right, and we're going to leave the volume right around where it is. We'll turn it down a little. So now it sounds really detuned, and we have oscillator B going more towards the right and oscillator A going more towards the left, so they're layering on top of each other. Then we are going to we're going to turn on the noise oscillator and select J60 from the analog tab. We are going to select key tracking and turn the pitch up to 33% and the volume up to 30. So now we should be hearing. So now with the key tracking on, this noise will be following whatever key we're selecting. So we have all of our oscillators set up right now. I guess what we should do next is turn on mono, legato, and turn the portamento up to around 22 milliseconds. And what this is going to do is this is really going to make a difference right here. So now let's move on to our envelopes, because we are doing a lot with envelope 1, 2, and 3. We aren't even going to touch the LFOs for this sound. So envelope 1 is going to be controlling the volume for our entire sound. So we're going to drag the attack up to 24 milliseconds, so it's taking off that initial transient and just making the sound a little bit smoother. We are going to turn the decay to 500 milliseconds, and that's not going to be changing anything because we aren't touching the sustain yet, but we're going to turn the sustain down to 0. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this curve and drag it just about all the way up to around right there. And we're going to leave the release at 15 milliseconds. Next, we are going to set envelope 2. And envelope 2 is going to be controlling the master tune of the entire sound. So we're going to set envelope 2's attack to 79. We're going to set the hold to 29, the decay to 244, and the sustain to 12%. And then we're going to turn the release up to 76 milliseconds. So now we should have a curve that kind of looks like this, and we're also going to drag this curve up a little bit. So now our envelope should be looking something like this, and it's not going to change anything right now. So the only way to modulate the master tune is through the matrix. So we're going to go ahead and select our source as envelope 2, destination, go down to global, master tune, and we are going to drag this up to 12. So now we're starting to hear that whip sound, and we're going to drag this output to 80, which is almost like a dry wet. So now that is really sounding like, a lot closer to our end sound. And that's that envelope 2 modulating the global pitch. So now it's time to do envelope 3. So for envelope 3, we are going to take the tack up to 317 and the decay to 494. Take the sustain all the way down and the release up to 76. And again, this won't do anything because we don't have it mapped to anything. But let's start by actually taking this curve and making it less curved. And we are going to put envelope 3 onto the blend of oscillator A and B. So let's drag it onto oscillator A. We're going to drag the range down to -45. And oscillator B, we will drag it down to -52. And I actually made the mistake of putting this on the detune knob instead of the blend. So let's right click and remove that. Put it on blend and drag this down to 52 again. So it's a very quick, subtle effect, but it is taming that detune a little bit. So that is all the modulations we're going to do for the envelopes, and our oscillators are all set up. We're not even going to use the filter for this patch, so let's move on to the effects. So the first effect we're going to put on is the hyper and dimension, and like I said before, this is going to sculpt your stereo image. So we're going to take the rate and turn it down to 10%. And this is just making the sound a little bit wider. We're going to take the detune and type in 72%. And the mix, we'll take it down to 32. And we're actually going to drag this unison up to 7. So it's making it a little bit wider, more exciting, just giving it a little bit more texture. Next thing we're going to do is set the dimension. So we're going to set the size to 5. And we're going to set the mix to 70. So this is really just kind of adding a lot of width to the sound. Next thing we're going to add is a chorus. We'll drag this to the top. And we are going to enable BPM mode and make sure that says 4-bar T. We're going to set the first delay to 2.5, the second delay to 7.5. So this is basically just adding 2 very quick delays, and it's really just layering the sound and making it sound a lot nicer. I always overlook the chorus, but after doing a little bit more sound design and more of these videos, the chorus is such a valuable effect. We are going to leave the depth all the way up. We're going to take the feedback to 29% and put the low pass filter all the way up. So we're letting all the frequencies in. And we're going to take the mix down to 13% because we don't want this that prominent. You can hear it very slightly in the background, and it's just adding like a little bit of space, just a small delay. Next thing we're going to add is a phaser, and we're going to turn the rate all the way down so the LFO isn't affecting these settings. We're going to take the depth up to 69% and the frequency down to 34%. So you can hear like a weird stereo effect right there where it's kind of boosting some frequencies and taking away from others. And we are going to take the feed at 64% and the phase down to 0. And then we're going to take the mix down to 59% because we don't want this sound too prominent. Next thing we're going to add is an EQ. And this is basically just going to low cut and boost some highs. So we're going to put on the low cut right here and take this down to 142. And take the Q down to 40. And then we are going to leave this at a high boost, leave the frequency where it is, drag the Q all the way down, and boost this to 9.8 decibels. So it's just boosting the highs, making it more present, and making it sound a little bit more high quality. Next thing we're going to add is a reverb. We are going to leave it on Hall, take the size down to 16. The decay will be 1.5, and the low cut is going to be at 53, so we're going to be cutting a lot of those lows. Just to make the reverb less muddy. We're going to take the high cut to 42 to cut out a little bit more of those highs. Take the spin down to 20. We're going to take the spin depth up to 27 and the wet or the mix down to 17. And the last thing we are going to add is a compressor, and we are not going to put this on multiband. We are just going to use this to catch the peaks because it's a very like plucky sound. So we're going to take the threshold down to negative 29.7. And you can see the compressor going into work there, and it's really just taming those peaks and kind of squashing the signal a little bit and making it a lot smoother. We're going to leave the ratio where it is, take the attack down to 15.5, so the compressor is working a little bit faster, and take the release up to 84.8, or somewhere around there. And we're going to bring a little bit of gain back in and bring it up to 6 decibels. So that is our sound right there. So let's play both of ours together and then play the original together and see how close we got. So that's it. We got it pretty much spot on. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys learned a lot. Like always, we have the download in the description that will come with the presets and the MIDI. So I definitely suggest you guys download this before you guys watch the video so you could follow along. But if not, definitely download it now. Feel free to use it and definitely learn from it. But I would run back through this video maybe once or twice and make the patch yourself, so you just know how to do it without even following along. And without even just reaching for that preset, you'll know how to design the sound. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'm Tassione, and this is Cymatics.